Aristotle, the last man who knew everything. It was 322 BC. In a dim room in Chalcis, an old man lay thin and fevered. He clutched a worn papyrus, and his fingers trembled as he wrote what he knew. Outside, the morning sun warmed the olive groves. Aristotle opened his eyes slowly. He had spent a lifetime asking questions, but now his own life had become a question. In that moment, he whispered, "All men by nature desire to know." Then the candle sputtered, the last scroll fell silent, and a question hung in the air. Could one man ever truly know everything? Today, the name Aristotle conjures a familiar portrait, the wise sage who taught Alexander the Great, the father of logic and science. People say he catalogued the stars, classified all animals, and laid out the laws of thought. But this popular story is incomplete. It overlooks the blind spots in his vision and the cost of his ambition. In this episode, you will discover how Aristotle's greatest strengths hid deep flaws, how his personal ambitions and human flaws shaped his philosophy, and how his legacy echoed through centuries in ways history often misses. The real question is this: was Aristotle truly the last man who knew everything? Or is that title a myth worth digging into? Greece, in 384 BC, was a world of city-states and warfare, not a comfortable stage for a genius. The north was rising. Philip of Macedon was forging an army that would soon conquer Greece. In the south, Athens nursed its wounds from past wars, its democracy fragile and proud. The common people lived under strict laws, respected the gods, and accepted slavery and patriarchy as facts of life. Medicine mixed superstition and early science. Natural philosophers explained the world with elements and gods. Into this world, Aristotle was born in the coastal city of Stagira. His father, Nicomachus, served as physician to a Macedonian king, linking young Aristotle to the very courts that threatened Greece's freedom. As a teenager, Aristotle sailed to Athens in 367 BC to join Plato's academy. Imagine his awe: towering marble temples, fierce political debates, rival schools of thought. Yet his hometown Stagira would soon be razed by King Philip's army, a rude lesson in how violent his world could be. At 17, Aristotle arrived in Athens eager to learn. He listened to Plato's lectures, but he did more. He noted every question unsolved by his teachers. Legend says, Plato once asked the class, "Why do we study?" And Aristotle answered, pointing at the rising sun, "Because all men by nature desire to know." That answer pleased Plato, but Aristotle meant it in his own way. He learned not just from words, but from nature, catching frogs to dissect at night, counting stars to find patterns. He turned philosophy into an early science. In time, he began to challenge the academy itself. Plato taught that unchanging forms explained the world. Aristotle objected, choosing evidence over ideals. That rivalry burned quietly when Plato died in 347 BC. Aristotle was passed over for leadership of the academy, probably because he was not an Athenian citizen. Facing exile in Athens, he left for Asia Minor. Those were perilous times. City after city sought alliances. Enemies lurked everywhere. Aristotle moved to Assos, and then Lesbos, towns ruled by former students of Plato. In those island years, he met Theophrastus and fell in love with nature. Together they measured the sea, collected plants, and dissected creatures. Aristotle even believed the heart, not the brain, was the seat of thought, a theory that would last millennia before science overturned it. But he did not shy from investigation. He dissected animals extensively to understand life, and eventually described over 500 species in detail. In Lesbos, he married Pythias, a niece of his host, and began writing notes that no one would read for 2,000 years. All the while, the Macedonian king Philip was unifying Greece by force. When Philip asked Aristotle to tutor his 13-year-old son Alexander, it was a turning point. The young tutor returned to Greece not as a student, but as an influential thinker. In 335 BC, Aristotle came back to Athens at age 49. He founded a school in the Lyceum, a public gymnasium by Apollo's temple. The room was abuzz with students, philosophers, future politicians, curious youths. Aristotle began to walk among them as he lectured, giving rise to the name Peripatetics. Imagine the scene: sun streaming through colonnades, Aristotle tapping a scroll and debating a question of justice. He had won a place at last. He would soon author the lectures that became the earliest complete philosophical treatises we have. But he also had powerful foes. Plato's nephew Speusippus already ran the academy, and Athenians eyed the Macedonian tutor with suspicion. Still, at the Lyceum, Aristotle's knowledge blossomed. He wrote on ethics, saying happiness comes from virtuous living. He wrote on politics, declaring man is by nature a political animal, and analyzing dozens of city constitutions. He established formal logic, the idea that true arguments depend on their form, not just facts. He believed each thing had four causes: material, formal, efficient, final, to explain why it exists. Under his guidance, the Lyceum amassed what may have been the world's first great research library. Students copied books from Egypt, Persia, and Athens, filling shelves. In biology, he taught that dolphins were mammals. In poetry, he dissected tragedy. In ethics, he explored the golden mean between excess and lack. By his 50s, Aristotle's mind had surveyed virtually every branch of knowledge of his era: logic, natural science, medicine, politics, art. His achievements at the summit were breathtaking. But greatness cast a long shadow. Aristotle's choices came at a cost. His life entwined with kings made him suspect to the staunch Greeks. He justified things like slavery as natural in theory, a view abhorrent today. He held that women were naturally inferior too. Even his language shows that bias. His unending pursuit of knowledge left little time for family. The man who wrote about happiness had little joy in late life. His beloved wife Pythias died young, and he lived apart from his own son Nicomachus, whom he named after his father, and possibly dedicated the Nicomachean Ethics to. Worse, some of his most famous ideas were simply wrong. He believed heavy bodies fall faster than light ones. That claim endured for centuries, until Galileo proved it false. Though, as Carlo Rovelli observes, Aristotle's formula even works roughly when objects fall through air. In astronomy, he insisted on geocentrism and a hierarchy of the spheres. In physics, he denied the possibility of a vacuum. His microscopes were too large to see atoms. With all his learning, he still accepted superstitions of the time. The greatest blow came late. In 323 BC, Alexander the Great died, and the old rivalries flared. Athenians, furious with the new kings, turned on anyone tied to Macedonia. Aristotle's opponents dredged up an old charge of impiety, the same charge that had killed Socrates. They demanded his head. Aristotle was 62, too weary to fight. He fled the city he loved. The hinge of his fate snapped when the Athenians closed in. He left Athens forever, abandoning the Lyceum and most of his manuscripts to a friend. He took no grand leave-taking, just a night escape in disguise, walking away from the only home he had ever chosen. That final year of his life was quiet and small. In 322 BC, in Chalcis, Aristotle lay dying of natural causes. He was an old man and exhausted. In the end, only two people were by his side: his former student Theophrastus and a servant. As he felt life ebbing, stories say he gave one last instruction: to say a certain word to avoid a traitor's death. And then he whispered, "I am not an Athenian or a Greek, but a citizen of the world." When he said this, he died. The candle guttered out on the life of the mind. In death, as in life, Aristotle left questions unanswered. The very question that opened the tale, could one man know everything, died with him. Only time would measure his answer. The world did not forget Aristotle. In fact, it could not. His influence sprawled through civilizations. Without him, who would have given us logic as we know it? Imagine Western science without syllogisms, without the idea that every argument has a form and a content. There would be no Nicomachean ethics, and perhaps no idea of a virtue as mean in moral thought. The word politics itself, and our whole study of government, traces back to him. In religion, the Christian theologians of the Middle Ages called him simply the philosopher. They used his works to explain faith with reason. The Arabic scholars translated him as Aristotle, and he bridged cultures. Modern biology still owes to him the practice of careful description and dissection. Geologists note Aristotle's early insights. He recorded that seas changed over ages, a fact Lyell praised long after. Aristotle's legacy had its judgments too. We honor him for logic and biology, yet condemn his justified slavery and misogyny. We admire his curiosity, but see how once he put faith in things, now discarded. Carlo Rovelli's surprising finding suggests that in some ways Aristotle's physics was not a complete blunder. In any case, his true legacy is concrete. The categories he invented, the very method of seeking cause, the library he imagined, they all bent the arc of history. His words continued. Manuscripts were recopied in Byzantine scribes' hands. In Western Europe, he was rediscovered in the Renaissance. Today, you might own something like Aristotle's biology or poetics on your shelf. His was a mind that bridged archaic Greece to the scientific age. No person has shaped the world quite like Aristotle. If he had never lived, our laws, our logic, perhaps even our language would be different. Is that an exaggeration? Hardly. Consider that he wrote and classified the very idea of a science that seeks causes. He once defined a wise person as one who knows all things as far as possible, who learns hard truths and seeks causes. It was arrogant for his time, and yet by modern standards we still call him a genius. He sought to know everything, and though he failed in details, he succeeded in spirit. In awe and inquiry, he remains our guide. Finally, we return to our cold open question. Was Aristotle truly the last man who knew everything? Or was that title a myth created by time? The answer is no simple judgment. In one light, he set a standard. He dared to question anything and everything known in his day. In another, he was a creature of his own time, with blind spots science later proved. Ultimately, Aristotle shows us that knowledge is a journey. As he wrote, "All men by nature desire to know, but no one really can know it all. The real wonder is that he tried." What do you think? Could anyone ever be a true last polymath? Was Aristotle a genius ahead of his time, or simply a man bound by the limits of ancient Greece? Share your thoughts. History is still debating him. If you want to keep uncovering such hidden layers of history, hit subscribe. After all, we have much more to learn from the lives that changed the world.